Melita is not your average museum. A grim collection of spoils from Lebanon's 2006 war with Israel are laid out for tourists. A victory tale, according to Hezbollah.
It's all about the memory and to preserve it. You won one war against the enemy and against those invaders who invaded your country. From time to time you think that the war it will begin. Maybe in the morning, maybe at night, and I don't know. But I hope there's no war again.
Lebanon and Israel have fought two major wars. The last conflict in 2006 erupted after Hezbollah, a Shia militia, captured 2 Israeli soldiers.
לבנון היא האחראית ולבנון תישא בתוצאות פעולותיה.
Israel responded with strikes by jets, tanks, and gunboats on southern Lebanon. The month-long conflict claimed the lives of more than 1,000 Lebanese people and more than 100 Israeli soldiers and 40 civilians.
It's been 10 years since the last war between Israel and Hezbollah was fought here in Lebanon. But that war only ended in a ceasefire. And it's not uncommon for people here to question when, not if, the fighting will resume.
This is David's Sling, the newest addition to Israel's anti-missile defense system.
מערכת קלע דוד, שרביט קסמים, מצטרפת לפיתוחים טכנולוגיים קודמים, כמו כיפת ברזל ומערכת החץ.
Hezbollah is Israel's Goliath, and its adversary has grown strong. The war in Syria has been a training ground for the group's fighters and a valuable route for weapons from Iran. Last month, Israel struck a warehouse containing an arms shipment near the Damascus airport, one of several targeted Israeli strikes that signal a new level of engagement with Hezbollah. Recently, the Israeli army tailored its training drills to use Hezbollah as the enemy. And it's built up a presence on the border, a development Hezbollah was eager to show journalists on a recent media tour.
Hezbollah wanted to send a message to Israel that says, I see what you are doing.
Israel's other worry is that Hezbollah will expand its presence from Syria to the Golan Heights.
This has been a long-standing goal of Iran and Hezbollah, is to turn the Golan not necessarily into an active battlefront with Israel, but if you like, an extension of the South Lebanon border, the blue line. So the Israelis then will have Hezbollah on their northern border, and in the future could also have Hezbollah and possibly the Iranians on their northeast border as well.
Hezbollah believes that the Zionist entity is a racist entity or a form of cancer. That Israel comes to Palestine and occupied it, and therefore Hezbollah calls for the removal of the Zionist entity.
For Israel, Hezbollah poses an existential threat, and its leader Hassan Nasrallah has ties to Lebanon's highest office. Israel recently condemned President Michel Aoun for saying the resistance's arms are not contrary to the state. It is an essential part of Lebanon's defense.
When a Lebanese president is elected with a big hug from Hezbollah and Nasrallah, then we're entitled to be worried.
In Lebanon, many wonder whether Israel will strike first, but General Jabber doesn't think so.
If Hezbollah launched 1,000 missiles every day, and they say they have more than 100,000, Israel can maybe stop or destroy 30%. That means 700 missiles will, destroy their targets. The only risk is the sea. Lebanon has oil and gas reserve. Israel also. There is a conflict between Lebanon and Israel in some region. Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah said, if Israel try to take our gas by any means, Hezbollah is ready to shell.
Both sides say they're ready, but unwilling to start a new Levantine war. But they may be entering an era of miscalculation, leading to aggressions that neither side can dial back in time. Sandra Gottman in Beirut for the Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Samuel Manasseh from Beirut. He's the executive director of Maison de Futur, a Lebanese think tank. Also with us in Beirut is Noor Samaha, the journalist, and from Tunis, Nicholas No. He's a journalist and co-founder of MideastWire.com. Thanks all of you for joining us. Nicholas, let's begin with you. You've written about this. You've suggested that Hezbollah and Israel are on the verge of another big one. Why do you think so?
Well, I think that after several years, or actually after more than 10 years now since the last Hezbollah-Israel conflict, we've really seen a breakdown in the main thing that kept the two parties from going to another round of hostilities, which arguably both sides want to a certain degree, or crave, as Hezbollah has said on several occasions, and as the Israelis have actually said, which is this balance of terror. In other words, both sides over the last 10, 11 years have realized that another iteration of the conflict would be extremely devastating for both sides, and especially for Lebanon. That balance of terror has really prevented a wider conflagration, although the underlying reasons for both of these sides going to another war have either been maintained or have grown over the years. What's happened in the last few weeks, I think, is one of these quote-unquote game changers, which is that the Israelis have finally deployed a full-spectrum missile defense system that their politicians and military can argue to their publics that they have done all they can to adequately dome off Israel at both the lower level, the medium range, and at the higher levels. And in fact, in the last few weeks, we've seen this system actually operationalized and also used, in fact, between Syria and Israel. So now Israel and Israeli politicians especially can say, we can deal a great blow to Hezbollah, our mortal enemy, which, by the way, the Israelis now say is their #1 threat, not the Iranians, it's Hezbollah. The Israeli leadership says is their #1 threat. We can deal them a decisive blow, and we can prevent the home front. And on the other hand, they've also developed over these years what they think is a winning strategy. They call it the Dahieh Doctrine. They say that we didn't beat Hezbollah in 2006 because we didn't hit Lebanon hard enough. Now we can, and we're domed off. That, I think, is a fundamental change in the balance of terror, and that's why I'm greatly concerned that not only miscalculation might lead to another conflagration, but actually maybe decided policy and perceived interests, especially on the Israeli side.
Okay, so Noor, will it take one provocation, one captured soldier, one Katyusha, or one more Israeli strike to trigger either side to kick this off? Are we at that point at which, you know, Nicholas seems to assume we are at?
I agree with Nicholas on certain points, but I don't think we're at the point where it will take one incident that will trigger a full front confrontation, partly because both sides are aware of the fact that the next war will lead to a war of existentialism, if you will. Both of them are well aware that they can't take that risk. So as far as Israel's concerned, it's not willing to take a risk where, fine, it can deal a severe blow to Hezbollah, but that won't be its ultimate goal. It wants to neutralize it completely. And right now, it doesn't have the capacity to be able to do that. At the same time, Hezbollah doesn't want to enter into this. Hezbollah sees that it is very busy in Syria. It needs to maintain a quiet domestic front. So it's not willing to embark on a war where it can't guarantee the outcome either. So Nick is right to a certain extent. There's definitely been a build-up in capabilities in terms of weaponry from both sides. But Hezbollah and Israel, especially Israel, can't guarantee a complete destruction of Hezbollah. And at the same time, it can't guarantee that Hezbollah won't enter into Israel, as it has been threatening to. Right. In 2006, the war basically was a defensive war for Hezbollah. Hezbollah has now been talking about an offensive strategy. So at the same time, this is something that Israel can't guarantee won't happen, nor can it control the timeline in which that war would happen. And Israel needs to make sure that it can deal a very decisive, limited, contained blow, which at the moment it doesn't have the capability to do so.
Okay, so Samuel, you have Nicholas who says, yes, there's a build-up and it might be close. Noor saying, yes, there's a build-up, but it might not be close, because there's too much game theory going on. Where do you stand, Samuel? Is it close?
Yes, because first of all, we have to mention that, or to notice, that Hezbollah is not a Lebanese
element. Hezbollah is an Iranian element, and all depends on the American-Iranian relationship and Israeli-Iranian relationship. This is first. Second, I think both parties, Israel and Hezbollah, do not have interest right now to go to war. First of all, the Israelis, in general, do not go to war except if there is an imminent threat. In this case, this threat is not till now imminent. Because why I'm saying that? Israel can use other tools to contain at least Hezbollah. Especially Israel now is using will use, with the help of the American, kind of economic and financial sanctions. What this means for the Lebanese. This kind of an incitement using the fertile ground of Hezbollah to be against him. This is now the first point on the Israeli agenda, to move the war from between Israel and Hezbollah to a domestic disorder inside Lebanon.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
This
so
is one.
Sure.
Second,
can I jump in here and we'll separate them out?
Another point.
Sure. Can I just jump in here and yes. We'll come back to you and you'll get a chance to make that point. I promise you. But on that
yes,
point,
sure,
let me go to Nicholas. Nicholas, on the points of using the Americans and sanctions, we know the Trump administration is quite hawkish on Iran and by extension then Hezbollah. U.S. Congress preparing more sanctions against Hezbollah. Now, I know Samuel says, they're an Iranian element, but they're also a part of Lebanese society. They're in parliament. They're one of the biggest political players around. They have a lot of support. These sanctions might hurt Lebanese society, right? Even Saad al-Hariri knows that. That's why he sent a delegation to Washington saying, hey, guys, careful with these sanctions. They hurt the Amal movement. They hurt the banks that everybody needs, not just Hezbollah supporters. Are we going to be in a situation where these sanctions squeeze Lebanon and make Hezbollah even stronger while they were trying to make them weaker?
Well, I don't. It definitely will hurt Lebanon. We see probably in these coming weeks and months, there's going to be more pressure put on Lebanon as a whole. The strategy being that somehow if you pressure Lebanon and its banking system, which is central to so many of the political communities that control the country, that those communities will then somehow pressure Hezbollah. That equation almost has never worked. It doesn't work. In fact, it's been a losing strategy, that kind of approach, for decades in Lebanon. But it will hurt Lebanon as a whole. The problem is that from the Israeli perspective, those sorts of pressures are not good enough. That is not having a substantive impact on what Israel says are existential threats to it. One, the increase in quality and quantity of weaponry for Hezbollah and its allies, and two, the increasing military formations in southern Syria and elsewhere, which Israel deems to be an existential threat to it, especially in the north of the country. So, sanctions and pressure and all these sorts of things, I don't think that's going to be good enough for the Israelis. And in fact, we have the evidence that it's not good enough, because the rate of Israeli strikes has been increasing exponentially over the last few weeks and months. Right. They are more and more bringing military firepower to bear in Syria and along the Lebanese-Syrian border. So they're not buying it. And that's why I think actually, he's wrong in one or two respects, certainly, which is that the Israelis do very much oftentimes go to preventive or preemptive war when they see what they perceive to be an existential threat to their interests. And I think in this case, we're seeing that coming to increasing focus. So that's a huge danger, on top of the second one, which I just want to emphasize, which is the idea of miscalculation and error. 2 years ago, in a response by Hezbollah, a response to an Israeli strike in southern Syria that killed an Iranian general and several top-level Hezbollah commanders, Hezbollah executed a pinpoint missile strike against the Israelis from South Lebanon, killed some Israeli soldiers. They missed hitting a busload of Israeli school children a few hundred meters down the same road. if that missile had gone off track and you had killed a dozen or more Israeli school children, error, miscalculation, this war can very easily start, and it will be very difficult, especially with the Israeli leadership, to stop that march to war, and especially now in the context of a Trump administration.
Sure, that's a good point. Don't underestimate human incompetence. Noor, I want to ask you if a war might actually bring back some greater legitimacy to Hezbollah in the region in general. 2006, when we covered that war, Hassan Nasrallah was seen as a hero across the Arab and Muslim world because of war with Israel. Hezbollah getting involved in the Syrian war a few years ago hurt them, hurt the brand, hurt the image. Many people turned on them. Might war with Israel actually be good for Hezbollah in reigniting or reconnecting with that kind of greater sense of brand awareness and across sectarian lines, bringing them back into the fold as an anti-Israel force?
I think it's an interesting question because obviously a lot has changed between 2006 and now, and what you're seeing is the popular support that Hezbollah had, like you said, in 2006, within the Sunni majority Arab street no longer exists as much. I actually think that it would be more interesting to see how the others, what side they fall on in this sense. I mean, what we have seen is we've seen Sunni states such as, majority Sunni states such as Saudi Arabia, such as Jordan, such as the Gulf in general, talking about working with Israel in order to combat the Iranian threat. So it would be interesting to see where they fall in terms of how they would react in terms of an Israeli attack, not just on Hezbollah, because like Nick said, it would be an attack on all of Lebanon. So, you know, would they stand behind Israel attacking all of Lebanon, including their own supporters inside Lebanon, or would they side with Hezbollah and the Lebanese people on that side? At the same time, if there was to be a war, we have to also include the fact that it could not just be limited to the Lebanese playing field. You should also consider the fact that it will be opened up to possibly the Syrian battlefield. So in this case, where do the opposition groups stand? Are they going to be behind Hezbollah? Are they going to be behind Israel? These are all factors that need to be taken into consideration. And I think it's very, very important because I don't think it's a clear-cut answer. I don't think you'll find people that will either be black and white on this. And I think Hezbollah has taken that into consideration. And I think also Israel has taken that into consideration. Its northern border, so its border with southern Syria, has remained relatively quiet with regards to the opposition, precisely because there hasn't been any attacks by the Syrian opposition onto Israel. Now, if Israel was to start launching attacks on Hezbollah in Syria and then have Syrian casualties as well, who knows what might happen with the Syrian opposition? And also whether or not they would be pushed to defend their Arab brethren as well. So I think it'll be very. I think these are issues that also need to be taken into consideration, and issues that both sides have taken into consideration.
Okay, let me bring in Samuel Manasseh because we are running out of time. Sir, I'm going to give you the final word here.
Yes, I would like also to emphasize something that I was talking about the Israeli side. Now about Hezbollah side, I don't think Iran and Hezbollah right now think about any escalation with Israel because the priority, the number one priority for Hezbollah and for Iran is to maintain or to save the regime of Bashar al-Assad. And the war with Israel, or even any also sporadic shellings with Israel that can shake the role of Hezbollah to maintain and to save Bashar al-Assad. This means that for the short term and also the midterm, I do not think that both the Israeli and Hezbollah or the Iranian can go to war, except there is one situation. If the new situation in southern Syria now, and also the American policy, the new American policy in Syria, the new American involvement in Syria, maybe can change this perspective and will lead to additional and more tension between Israel and Hezbollah on both borders, the Lebanese border and the Syrian borders.
Yeah, and it's difficult to guess what the American policy will be because it evolves as it goes along. Hard to keep up with Trump's foreign policy. It's a big guessing game.
No, but we can draw a picture now about maybe the basic elements of this policy.
We don't know that. It might change next week.
American right now, the number one is to stop the Iranian emergence in Syria and in Iraq and in Lebanon. This is the target. They can reach it, I don't know. They will succeed, I don't know. But this is at least what we know from the American vision towards the Middle East.
Let's see if it stays the same next week. It's difficult to tell. But it's been a pleasure talking to all of you. I've got to move on. Nicholas No, Noor Samaha, and Samuel Manassa, thanks so much for joining us.